The first scream cut through the string quartet before the bride had even reached the aisle. "Someone get her out of here, now!" Heads turned. Conversations snapped shut. Champagne flutes froze halfway to lips. The music faltered, violins thinning into an awkward tremble as every eye followed the direction of the shout. At the far edge of the garden beneath a white oak heavy with Spanish moss, a black woman stood completely still. Her name was Eleanor Brooks. She looked to be in her early 60s. Grey threaded neatly through her pulled-back hair. A navy dress, modest, well-tailored, but unmistakably unremarkable among the sea of silk and linen. No hat, no jewelry worth noticing. A small leather purse held close to her side knuckles, pale from the grip. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't moved toward the ceremony, hadn't spoken to anyone. But the crowd had already decided she didn't belong. The woman who screamed was Lorraine Calloway, mother of the groom. 59 rigid posture, pearls tight against her throat like armor. She stood near the front row, one hand clenched around a folded program, the other pointing openly without shame. "I don't care who she says she is," Lorraine snapped to the wedding coordinator. She was not invited. The coordinator leaned in, whispering frantically eyes, flicking between Eleanor and the guests. "Mrs. Calloway, maybe we can handle this quietly." "There is nothing quiet about someone wandering into my son's wedding," Lorraine said, her voice carrying. "This is private property." Private. The word landed hard. Eleanor felt it hit her chest like a shove. Not for the first time in her life. Probably not the last. She lowered her eyes, not in apology, but calculation. Around her the garden breathed. Chairs scraped. Shoes shifted on gravel. Someone coughed too loudly. Somewhere behind her, a server murmured, "Oh no," under their breath. From Eleanor's perspective, it all unfolded like a slow pan of a camera. The linen-draped tables, the white roses imported from somewhere warmer, the rented estate perched on Virginia soil that had been soaked in history long before any of these families had names. She saw how the guests leaned subtly away from her shoulders, angling purses pulled closer, the invisible circle tightening without a word. Avoidance didn't require permission. 2 men in grey suits approached. Security. Their steps were careful, rehearsed. They didn't rush. They didn't touch her. "Ma'am," one said softly, a man in his 40s with tired eyes. "We're going to need you to step off the grounds." Eleanor met his gaze. Held it. Long enough for him to shift his weight. "I haven't done anything," she said. Her voice was calm, low. No tremor. Lorraine scoffed loudly. "That's what they always say." The words hung there ugly and unclaimed, but no one challenged them. Not one guest. Not one family friend. Silence thick and complicit. The groom had not yet arrived. That mattered. Eleanor took a breath. She smelled cut grass and perfume, and the faint salt of nearby water. She could feel the eyes on her back measuring, guessing, reducing. In the 3rd row, an older man with thinning white hair stared at her longer than the rest. His brow furrowed. Recognition flickered, then vanished as Lorraine snapped her fingers again. "Please remove her before we embarrass ourselves further." Embarrassment. Eleanor almost smiled. The security guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am." Eleanor nodded once. Not in surrender, in choice. She turned and walked heels, sinking slightly into the grass, every step steady. No rush, no apology. She passed the oak tree, the photographer, the catering staff who suddenly found their shoes fascinating. One server, a young woman with shaking hands, whispered, "I'm sorry." Barely audible. Eleanor did not respond. Not because she didn't hear, because she did. At the gravel path she stopped, not for the guards, for herself. She looked back, letting the moment stretch just enough to unsettle them. Lorraine crossed her arms, chin lifted victorious. "This is what happens when you don't respect boundaries," she said to no one in particular. Eleanor memorized her face. Then she walked off the estate. The ceremony resumed with forced enthusiasm. The quartet found its rhythm again. Guests exhaled relieved conversations restarting in murmurs. A problem removed, balance restored. But something had shifted. Behind the catering tent, the estate manager wiped sweat from his neck. He'd seen Eleanor before, years ago. Not like this. Not alone. He said nothing. 20 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up along the road bordering the property. It was older, well-kept, unremarkable. Eleanor stepped out, the heat pressing against her skin as she opened the trunk. Inside was a slim binder, worn edges. No logo. No drama. She closed the trunk and stood for a moment, listening. Laughter floated from the garden now. The bride had arrived. Applause rose, genuine this time. Music swelled. Eleanor adjusted her grip on the binder and walked back toward the gate. No one stopped her. This time she did not head toward the chairs. She moved along the perimeter, where guests rarely looked, where the power lines of the event were invisible but real. The groom appeared at the far end of the aisle, tall, nervous, smiling too tightly. His name was Daniel Calloway. 38, banker, clean record now. The kind of man people trusted without asking why. As he turned toward the officiant, his eyes drifted. They landed on Eleanor. His smile vanished. For a fraction of a second the world tilted. His breath caught. The color drained from his face so fast it startled the man beside him. He stepped forward off the path, ignoring the whispers behind him. Lorraine noticed. "Daniel," she hissed. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. He walked toward Eleanor. Slow at first, then faster. His composure cracking with every step. Guests leaned in, confused. Cameras rose instinctively. Eleanor stayed where she was. When he stopped in front of her, the noise of the wedding dissolved into a dull roar. He swallowed. "Eleanor Brooks," he said. Clearly, loudly enough for the nearest guests to hear. The name rippled, not shouted, not announced, spoken with weight. Eleanor lifted her chin. "Yes," she said. Daniel exhaled like someone who had been holding his breath for years. "I didn't know you were coming." Lorraine's mouth fell open. "Daniel!" She snapped, panic edging her voice. "Who is this woman?" He turned to his mother. His hands shook. "This," he said, "is the woman who told me the truth when no one else." The guests stilled. Eleanor watched Lorraine's confidence fracture, just a hairline crack. But enough. She hadn't said a word yet. She didn't need to. Not anymore. Lorraine Calloway laughed first, sharp and brittle, the kind of sound meant to erase a moment by drowning it. "Daniel," she said, stepping forward with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "You're nervous. Weddings do that. Let's get you back to the altar." Daniel didn't move. His gaze stayed on Eleanor, searching her face as if for confirmation that this was real, that she wasn't another memory slipping through his fingers. The string quartet hesitated again, bows hovering, unsure whether to keep playing or flee. "I didn't imagine it," Daniel said quietly. "You're here." Eleanor felt the weight of the garden settle onto her shoulders. Dozens of eyes. Curiosity sharpening into something more dangerous now that her name had been spoken by the groom himself. She could sense the recalculation happening in real time. People adjusted their posture. Whispers bloomed. Lorraine's smile thinned. "You know her," she said, each word clipped. From where Daniel rubbed his palm against his trouser leg, a habit he'd never quite broken. From before. From a time I'm not proud of. A murmur ran through the front rows. The bride, Claire, leaned toward her maid of honor, confusion creasing her brow. The officiant glanced helplessly at the coordinator, who was already sweating through his collar. Lorraine stepped closer, lowering her voice, though it still carried. "This is not the place for old acquaintances, especially ones who show up uninvited." Eleanor spoke before Daniel could answer. "I was invited," she said. Lorraine turned, startled by the calm certainty of it. By whom, Eleanor didn't point. She didn't need to. By the truth, she said, and the word landed like a dropped plate. Lorraine scoffed. "That's not how invitations work." "It is," Eleanor replied, when silence has done enough damage. The older man in the third row shifted recognition, returning this time, refusing to leave. He leaned toward his wife, whispering urgently. The estate manager watched from behind the hedge, jaw tight. Daniel drew a breath. "Mum," he said, and the single syllable carried a warning she hadn't heard from him in years. "Please." Lorraine straightened. "Please what?" "Please stop," he said. "You don't know what you're doing." She laughed again, louder this time, as if daring the crowd to agree with her. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting my family." Eleanor felt the familiar pull in her chest. Protection was always the word used to justify exclusion. She reached into her purse, slow enough to be seen, and withdrew the slim binder. No rush, no flourish. The security guard tensed. Daniel noticed. "She's not a threat," he said quickly. "She's the reason I'm standing here." That stopped Lorraine cold. "What does that mean?" Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with resolve. "It means there was a time I almost lost everything. My job. My reputation. Claire." He glanced back at his bride apology flickering across his face. "My future." Claire's eyes widened. She took a step toward him, instinctively reaching for his hand. He squeezed her fingers once, grounding himself. "And Eleanor," Daniel continued, "was the only person who refused to let me lie to myself." The words rippled outward. Eleanor felt them pass over. The guests felt the shift from disdain to something like unease. Power didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrived as a question people weren't ready to answer. Lorraine shook her head. "This is manipulation," she said. This is exactly how people like her operate. Daniel flinched. Don't. The edge in his voice cut through her. For the first time, Lorraine hesitated. Eleanor watched the mother and son, saw the fracture widen. She had not come for this moment, but she would not waste it. Daniel, she said gently now, you don't owe anyone an explanation today. He met her eyes. I owe you one. He turned to the guests, to the faces he had known his entire life, some friendly, some calculating, all suddenly attentive. 5 years ago, he said, I was asked to move numbers. Just a little. Everyone did it. That's what I told myself. Lorraine's breath caught. Daniel. I didn't listen, he said. Not until Eleanor did something no one else was willing to do. He looked back at her. She told me no. Eleanor felt the memory rise unbidden. A small office, late afternoon light, a man trying to convince himself that harm done quietly didn't count. She didn't threaten me, Daniel said. She didn't shame me. She told me exactly what would happen if I kept going. And then she told me who I could still be if I stopped. The garden was silent now. Even the birds seemed to have fled. Lorraine's voice dropped to a whisper. Who is she? Eleanor considered the question. The easy answer hovered sharp and final. But that was not why she was here. Not yet. She's someone who remembers, Daniel said instead. And someone who doesn't forget. Lorraine stared at Eleanor. Really stared this time, as if seeing her for the first time. You think this gives you the right to disrupt my son's wedding? Eleanor held her gaze. I think pretending this disruption didn't already exist would be the greater harm. A flash of anger crossed Lorraine's face, then something else. Fear. She glanced around, noticing the phones now raised, the whispers turning cautious. This estate, Lorraine said, grasping for ground. This event. Everything here has rules. Eleanor nodded. So does integrity. The estate manager stepped forward, despite himself. Mrs. Calloway, he said quietly, perhaps we should take a moment. Lorraine rounded on him. You stay out of this, he swallowed. With respect, ma'am, this already involves all of us. Daniel squeezed Claire's hand again. I need to finish, he said softly. Claire nodded, tears bright in her eyes. I'm here. Daniel turned back to Eleanor. You didn't come for me, he said. Did you? No, Eleanor replied. I came for the place. Lorraine stiffened. What place? Eleanor glanced around the garden. The trees, the stone paths worn smooth by decades of careful feet. This one. A collective intake of breath swept through the crowd. Lorraine laughed high and sharp. This is absurd. Is it? Eleanor asked. Or is it uncomfortable? Daniel looked between them, understanding dawning, slowly, heavily. Mom, he said. What did you never tell me? Lorraine's face hardened. Nothing that concerns you. Eleanor opened the binder just enough for the edge of a document to show. Not proof yet, not accusation, just possibility. The past has a way of resurfacing, she said, especially when it's been buried improperly. The security guard shifted closer, uncertain now who he was meant to protect. Lorraine took a step back. You don't get to do this, she said. Not here. Eleanor closed the binder. I didn't choose here, she said. You did. Daniel exhaled, the sound shaky, but steadying. He looked at the officiant, at the guests, at his mother. The ceremony can wait, he said. Lorraine stared at him, stunned. Daniel. He met her eyes. I won't start my marriage with another lie. The word struck deeper than Eleanor expected. She felt a tightness in her throat quickly mastered. This was not her moment. Not yet. But the ground had shifted. The first crack had become a fault line, and somewhere beneath the white chairs and trimmed hedges, the weight of history was beginning to move. The first person to clap was not a guest. It was the officiant. The sound was tentative, a single hollow beat that echoed too loudly in the sudden stillness. He stopped immediately, color rushing to his face, realizing what he had done. But the damage was done. The moment had cracked open. Lorraine Calloway turned slowly, scanning the faces around her. She saw uncertainty where obedience had lived minutes ago, saw people reassessing their smiles, their loyalties. Old friends who suddenly refused to meet her eyes. She felt the shift like a change in pressure before a storm. This ceremony is not being delayed, she said, forcing authority back into her voice. Daniel, get back here. Daniel didn't move. He stood beside Eleanor now, close enough to feel the steadiness coming off her like quiet heat. His hands had stopped shaking. I already told you, he said. I'm done pretending. Lorraine's jaw tightened. You're embarrassing us. Eleanor watched Lorraine carefully. Not the anger, the fear beneath it. Fear always spoke louder if you listened long enough. Claire stepped forward, then her dress, brushing the grass veil, trembling in the light breeze. Mrs. Calloway, she said gently. Maybe we should hear her out. Lorraine rounded on her future daughter-in-law. You stay out of this. Claire flinched, then straightened. I can't. That word landed differently, Eleanor noticed. The estate manager moved closer again, wringing his hands. Perhaps we should relocate the guests to the reception area, he suggested. Give everyone some space. Absolutely not. Lorraine snapped. No one is moving until she leaves. Eleanor turned slightly, addressing the crowd without raising her voice. You're welcome to stay, she said, or go. That choice is yours. The power in offering a choice rippled outward. Several guests glanced at one another, uncertain. A few rose quietly, drifting toward the bar, as if they'd planned it all along. No one stopped them. Lorraine saw it happening. Control slipping. She gestured sharply at the security guards. Remove her. Now! The guards hesitated. Not because they feared Eleanor, but because something about the room had changed. Orders without moral footing felt heavier. Daniel stepped between them. If you touch her, he said, you touch me. Lorraine's eyes widened. Don't be dramatic. I'm not, he replied. I'm being honest. Eleanor felt a familiar ache. She had not come to be shielded. She placed a hand lightly on Daniel's arm. It's all right, she said. This isn't about force. Lorraine laughed again, but this time it sounded hollow. Then what is it about? Eleanor looked at her. Really looked. Accountability. The word cut through the murmurs. Lorraine recoiled slightly, as if slapped. Don't use that word with me, she said. "You don't know what we've built." "I know exactly what was built," Eleanor replied, "and what was erased to make room for it." The older man in the third row stood abruptly. "She's right," he said, voice shaking. His wife gasped, grabbing his sleeve. "Henry," she whispered. "Sit down." He didn't. "I worked here when I was a boy," he said. "Before the Callaways. Before the renovations. My father did too." Lorraine stared at him. "This is not the time." "It never is," Henry said. "That's the point." A murmur of agreement rose, soft but undeniable. Eleanor felt it swell the collective memory, pressing upward through manicured soil. Lorraine took a step back, her heel sinking into the grass. "This is a witch hunt," she said. "You're all letting yourselves be manipulated." Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "We're listening." Eleanor opened the binder fully, now laying it on a nearby table meant for programs. Papers fluttered slightly in the breeze. Not accusations. Records. Dates. Names. "I'm not here to accuse," she said. "I'm here to ask questions that were never answered." Lorraine's eyes darted to the documents. "You can't prove anything." Eleanor met her gaze. "I don't have to. Others already have." That landed harder. Lorraine's breath quickened. The estate manager swallowed. "Mrs. Calloway," he said carefully, "there have been inquiries over the years. Requests we were told to ignore." Lorraine spun on him. "You were paid to ignore them." "Yes," he said quietly. "I was." The word paid hung in the air. Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in him had settled. How long, he asked his mother. Lorraine's mouth opened, then closed. "This is not the place." 5 years ago, Daniel said, voice tight. "You told me our family legacy was clean, that everything we had was earned." It was Lorraine insisted. "It is." Eleanor tilted her head. "Earned by whom, silence?" Claire covered her mouth, tears spilling now. "Daniel," she whispered. "What is she talking about?" Daniel turned to her, pain etched across his face. "I think," he said, "I think there are parts of my family I never wanted to see." Eleanor felt the weight of that admission. She had seen it before. The moment when truth cracked love open, not to destroy it, but to test it. Lorraine straightened, drawing herself up. "This stops now," she said. "If you don't leave, I will call my attorney." Eleanor nodded. "That would be wise." Lorraine blinked. "What I said that would be wise," Eleanor repeated. "Because he's already involved." The crowd leaned in. Lorraine's voice rose. "You think you scare me?" "No," Eleanor said. "I think you scare yourself." Lorraine's composure finally fractured. "Get out!" she screamed. "All of you. This is my home." Daniel shook his head slowly. "It was never just yours." That sentence landed like a verdict. Lorraine looked at her son, really looked, and saw something she hadn't prepared for. Distance, resolve, judgment. The security guards stepped back, uncertain now who they served. Eleanor gathered the papers, sliding them back into the binder with care. "This doesn't end today," she said, "and it doesn't need to explode to be real." She turned to Daniel. "You've already done the hardest part." He swallowed. Standing still, she smiled faintly. Standing honest. Lorraine sank into a chair, suddenly small. For the first time since Eleanor arrived, she looked her age. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Not coming here, just passing. A reminder. Eleanor felt the pull of time. The next move waited, not hers alone. The guests stood frozen, caught between spectacle and reckoning. No one spoke. No one laughed. The wedding had not been cancelled, but it had been transformed into something heavier, and beneath the white roses and borrowed vows, the truth was no longer buried. A black sedan rolled through the iron gates just as the sun slipped behind the tree line, throwing long shadows across the lawn like bars. Lorraine Calloway saw it first. Her shoulders stiffened, a reflex sharpened by years of command. "Who did that?" she demanded, scanning faces. No one answered. The guests had gone quiet again, the kind of quiet that followed consequences, not confusion. The car stopped near the service drive. A man stepped out, tall, lean, his suit conservative, to the point of anonymity. He adjusted his glasses, checked his phone, and looked toward the garden with the careful expression of someone who already knew what he would find. Daniel felt Claire's fingers tighten around his. "Is this part of it?" she whispered. Eleanor watched without moving. She recognized the man by posture alone, the way he measured distance, the way he paused before entering a charged space. That, she said softly, is counsel. Lorraine scoffed too loudly. For whom? The man approached, nodding politely to no one in particular, eyes scanning until they found Eleanor. He stopped at a respectful distance. "Ms. Brooks," he said. "Thank you for waiting." The name again. Clear. Intentional. The crowd stirred. Lorraine's face flushed. "Who are you?" she snapped. The man turned to her, offering a thin smile. "Aaron Feldman. I represent the Hollis Trust." A ripple passed through the older guests. The Hollis Trust was not a rumor. It was a fixture. Quiet, persistent, the kind of institution that didn't threaten because it didn't need to. Lorraine laughed, sharp and brittle. "We don't deal with trusts. This is a family estate." Aaron inclined his head. "Managed by a family," he corrected. "Owned by something else." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Mom." Lorraine ignored him. "This is harassment," she said. "You show up unannounced to a private event with lawyers and papers." Aaron raised a hand, gentle but firm. "We did not come unannounced. We came after repeated requests for records went unanswered." Eleanor stepped forward at last. The crowd parted instinctively. She could feel their eyes recalibrating the old assumptions shedding like skin. "I asked for a pause," she said. "Not a spectacle." Aaron nodded. "Understood." Lorraine's voice cracked. "You planned this?" "No," Eleanor replied. "I prepared for it." That distinction mattered. It always did. The estate manager cleared his throat. "Mrs. Calloway," he said. Voice low. "I was instructed to forward correspondence to counsel." "I did." Lorraine turned on him, fury flaring. You were paid to follow instructions. I was paid, he said quietly, not to lie. The words fell heavy. Daniel closed his eyes. Claire leaned into him, her breath shallow. Aaron opened a slim folder, not the binder Eleanor carried. His pages were crisp, printed, unadorned. This property, he said, was placed into a charitable land trust in the late 1970s. The intent was preservation, stewardship, public access under specific conditions. Lorraine shook her head. That's not true. It is, Aaron said. The management contract your family holds was temporary. Renewable, conditional, Eleanor added, and revocable. Lorraine's laughter broke, splintered. You're saying my family doesn't own our home. Eleanor held her gaze. I'm saying you were never meant to keep it forever. Daniel's breath hitched. He looked around the garden, the place he had known his entire life. The weddings, the holidays, the sense of permanence that had felt unshakable. You knew, he said to his mother. Not a question. Lorraine's mouth opened, closed. Her silence answered. Claire pulled her hand away gently. You knew, she repeated, voice shaking. Lorraine turned to her eyes, blazing. You don't understand. Claire's voice broke. Then explain it. Lorraine couldn't, not without unraveling herself. Aaron continued unflinching. Over the past 2 decades, the terms of stewardship were violated. Restricted areas were developed. Public access was denied. Financial disclosures were incomplete. Daniel stared at Eleanor. You're here to take it back. I'm here, Eleanor said, to stop the harm from continuing. Lorraine laughed again, but there was no strength left in it. You think this is harm? We maintained this place. We invested in it. With money generated by exclusion, Eleanor replied. By locking doors that were never yours to close. A woman near the back began to cry quietly. Her husband put an arm around her eyes, fixed on the ground. Lorraine's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair, steadying herself. This is a mistake, she said, voice smaller now. We can fix this quietly. Aaron shook his head. That option passed. Daniel stepped forward, voice hoarse. What happened? Muhammad, what happens now? Eleanor looked at him. Truly looked, weighing the cost of honesty against the cost of delay. Now, she said, there is an audit, a formal review. The trust will assume oversight. Lorraine looked up sharply. You're throwing us out? No, Eleanor said. We're ending a privilege. The distinction sliced clean. Sirens wailed again, closer this time, then faded. The sound set Lorraine trembling. Aaron closed his folder. There will be notices, timelines, options. Lorraine's laugh dissolved into a sob. This is my son's wedding. Daniel flinched. You made it that. Silence swallowed the garden. The string quartet had long since stopped. The officiant stood, forgotten hands clasped, eyes wide. Eleanor felt the familiar ache in her chest, the moment where justice met grief, where no one walked away unscarred. She had learned long ago that accountability did not come gently, but it could come with restraint. She turned to Claire. You should go inside, she said. Get some water. Claire hesitated, then nodded. She looked at Daniel, eyes searching. He squeezed her hand once. "I'll be there." Lorraine watched them, something breaking open in her face that anger had long concealed. Regret, sharp and useless. Aaron checked his watch. "We should secure the documents." Eleanor nodded. "Yes." Lorraine straightened suddenly, grasping at one last thread. "You think this makes you powerful," she said to Eleanor. "Showing up here. Taking everything." Eleanor met her gaze. Power would have been letting this continue because it was easier. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "This," she said, "is responsibility." Lorraine collapsed back into the chair, tears streaking her makeup. Around her, the guests stood suspended, caught between loyalty and conscience, spectacle and truth. Eleanor turned away, not out of victory, but necessity. There was more to come. There always was. Behind her, the estate exhaled old walls, listening as they always had. The night settled in, carrying with it the weight of reckoning and the fragile possibility of repair. The rain began without warning, a soft hiss against linen and leaves, as if the estate itself had finally decided to speak. Guests shifted chairs, scraping back as umbrellas bloomed open in awkward bursts. The sky darkened to a bruised grey, heavy, with the kind of weather Virginians knew well, the kind that lingered. Staff moved quickly, trained smiles gone, practicality taking over. The wedding, once so meticulously planned, began to dissolve into something unrecognizable. Eleanor stood beneath the oak, unmoving, the first drops darkening the shoulders of her dress. She welcomed the cold touch. Rain had a way of washing the noise away. Daniel returned from the tent where Claire had gone, his tie loosened now, hair damp at the temples. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Worn, awake. "She's asking for you," he said quietly. Eleanor knew who he meant. "I'll come in a moment." Daniel nodded, understanding without explanation. He hesitated, then spoke again. "I never thanked you." "You did," Eleanor said. "When you stopped," he exhaled. "That was the hardest thing I've ever done." "It usually is," she replied. "That's how you know it mattered." The rain strengthened, drumming harder now, pushing people toward shelter. The estate manager shouted instructions, voice cracking under pressure. The bar shut down. Music cases were snapped closed. What remained was the truth exposed and soaked through. Inside the main house, Lorraine sat alone in the parlor, staring at a portrait she had walked past 1,000 times without seeing. An oil painting of the estate in its earliest days, before the renovations, before the fences. The land looked old then, honest. Her hands trembled in her lap. She had removed her pearls. They lay coiled beside her like something shed. When Eleanor entered, Lorraine looked up sharply, instinctively, straightening before she caught herself. Pride died hard. So Lorraine said hoarsely, "You've won." Eleanor closed the door behind her, the sound muted by the thick wood. "This isn't about winning." Lorraine laughed weakly. "That's easy to say when you're taking everything." Eleanor moved closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm taking responsibility for what was neglected." Lorraine's eyes filled. "You don't know what it took to keep this place running. The pressure, the expectations." "I do," Eleanor said. "Just not the way you mean." Lorraine shook her head. We didn't steal it. We inherited a mess. You inherited an advantage, Eleanor replied gently, and used it to make forgetting easier. Lorraine's breath hitched. She looked away. Daniel hates me. He's angry, Eleanor said. There's a difference. Lorraine laughed bitterly. You're very good at this, turning everything into a lesson. Eleanor felt the edge of weariness press in. This isn't a lesson, she said. It's a reckoning. Lorraine looked up again, eyes sharp despite the tears. And what about me? What happens to us? Eleanor considered her carefully. Not the caricature Lorraine had played outside, but the woman beneath it, afraid, cornered, human. There will be consequences, Eleanor said. There should be. Lorraine flinched. Prison. That depends, Eleanor replied. On cooperation, on honesty. Lorraine laughed, hollow. Honesty didn't get us very far today. Dishonesty got you here, Eleanor said. That's different. The silence stretched. Rain rattled against the windows, the estate breathing around them. Lorraine pressed her palms to her eyes, shoulders shaking. I thought if I held on long enough, she whispered it would become mine. Eleanor felt something soften in her chest. That's a common mistake. Lorraine looked up, eyes red. Will you ruin my son's life? Eleanor met her gaze steadily. Your son is already trying to save it. Lorraine swallowed hard. Then do it, she said. Whatever you're going to do. Just don't pretend this is mercy. Eleanor nodded. I won't. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. Lorraine, she said. You can still choose how this part ends. Lorraine didn't answer. She stared at the painting, seeing it now for the first time. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. The garden was emptying guests, retreating in clusters, conversations, hushed and urgent. News traveled fast in places like this, faster than apologies ever could. Aaron Feldman waited under the awning phone, pressed to his ear. He nodded when he saw Eleanor ending the call. We've secured the files, he said. There will be an investigation, federal and state. Eleanor nodded. Good. Daniel approached Rain, speckled and resolute. She wants to talk again, he said. Later. Not now. That's wise, Eleanor replied. He hesitated. What happens to the wedding? Eleanor glanced back at the estate lights, glowing warmly despite the storm. That depends on what you want it to mean. Daniel nodded slowly. I don't want it built on lies. Then it won't be, Eleanor said. Claire emerged from the house, then eyes swollen but clear. She walked straight to Eleanor, stopping just short of her. I didn't know, she said, about any of it. I know, Eleanor replied. Claire took a breath. I still want to marry him. Eleanor smiled, small but genuine. Then do it for the right reasons. Claire nodded, determination settling over her. She took Daniel's hand. We'll do it somewhere else, she said. Somewhere honest. Daniel squeezed her fingers, relief flooding his face. As they walked away together, Eleanor felt the weight lift just slightly. Not gone. Never gone. But lighter. The estate manager approached, hat in hand. "Ms. Brooks," he said, voice thick. "We should have said something sooner." Eleanor met his eyes. "You're saying it now." He nodded, swallowing hard. "That will have to count." She turned toward the gate, the binder tucked under her arm. Each step felt heavier than the last, but necessary. Behind her, the estate stood silent, stripped of pretense, awaiting whatever came next. The rain had cleaned the air. The night smelled new. Eleanor paused at the edge of the property, looking back one final time. Not in triumph, in resolve. Some places demanded truth. Some demanded time. This one demanded both. She stepped into the waiting car as the door closed softly behind her, leaving the estate to reckon with itself in the quiet aftermath of the storm. Morning came slow and grey, the kind that didn't ask permission before settling in your bones. Eleanor woke before the call did. She lay still in the guest room of a modest inn down the road, listening to the hum of the heater and the distant sound of traffic waking up. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the night before. Not triumph, not regret, just the familiar ache that followed, telling the truth out loud. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. She answered without looking at the screen. "Yes." "It's moving faster than we expected," Aaron said. His voice was calm, but underneath it ran a current of urgency. The audit triggered a secondary review. Zoning tax abatements, conservation easements. There's more buried there. Eleanor closed her eyes. "There usually is. There's also media interest," he added. "A neighbor filed a noise complaint last night. Someone overheard names. The phrase land trust is already circulating." "Contain it," Eleanor said. Not silence. Context. A pause. Understood. She ended the call and sat up, feet touching the cold floor. Outside, the parking lot glistened from the rain, the world rinsed but not reset. She dressed simply, the same navy dress, a coat pulled close. She wanted no armor today. Only clarity. Back at the estate, the air felt different. Quieter, but tighter. Vehicles lined the drive, now unmarked sedans and a county truck idling near the gate. Staff moved with purpose instead of pretense. No music, no flowers being rearranged, just work. Daniel stood near the steps, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground as if it might open and offer answers. He looked up when Eleanor approached, relief flickering across his face before he could stop it. "They're here," he said. "Everyone." "Who's everyone?" she asked. "Everyone who matters," he replied. "And everyone who's scared." A pair of investigators crossed the lawn, clipboards tucked under arms, eyes scanning without curiosity. They nodded to Eleanor. Professional reserved. Respect without reverence. Lorraine watched from an upstairs window. Eleanor felt her gaze before she saw her. The house had a way of holding its breath, as if waiting to see which version of itself would survive. Inside the parlor smelled of old wood and stale flowers. Lorraine sat rigid on the edge of a chair, hands folded, spine straight, as if posture alone could keep the walls from closing in. "You came back," Lorraine said. "No accusation, just fact." "I said this wouldn't end quickly," Eleanor replied. Lorraine swallowed. "The papers are asking questions." "They should," Eleanor said. Lorraine laughed softly bitter. I spent years controlling the narrative. Now it's controlling me. That's what narratives do when they're built on omission, Eleanor said. Lorraine's eyes flashed. You don't enjoy this. Eleanor considered her answer carefully. I don't enjoy the damage, she said. I accept the responsibility. Lorraine's shoulders sagged just slightly. They're saying we benefited from protected land, that we denied access, that we misreported funds. They're saying what the records show, Eleanor replied. Lorraine's voice dropped. If they charge us, they will, Eleanor said gently. The question is how far it goes. Lorraine looked up sharply, and Daniel Eleanor met her gaze. Daniel will be judged by what he does now, not by what you hid. That landed. Lorraine's jaw tightened, then trembled. I thought if I kept it all together, she whispered, he'd never have to see the cracks. Cracks are how light gets in, Eleanor said quietly. Lorraine laughed, a short sound edged with pain. You always talk like that. Only when it's true. Outside voices rose briefly, then settled. A reporter had arrived at the gate, camera slung low, waiting. Not pushing. Yet. Daniel knocked softly on the doorframe. They're asking for you, he said. Together. Eleanor nodded. The dining room had been transformed into a temporary command center. Papers spread across the table, laptops humming, coffee gone cold. Aaron stood with two officials, one county, one federal, explaining lines and timelines. When Eleanor entered the room, stilled. We'll need your statement, the federal agent said. Not unkindly. You'll have it, Eleanor replied. On record. Daniel stood beside her shoulders, squared. I want to be present. The agent raised an eyebrow. Eleanor nodded. He stays. Lorraine hovered near the doorway, unsure where she belonged now. The questions came measured, methodical. Dates, decisions, signatures. Eleanor answered without embellishment. When she didn't know, she said so. When responsibility lay elsewhere, she named it. Daniel listened, sometimes flinching, sometimes nodding. When asked about the renovations, he spoke up, voice steady. I approved them, he said. I didn't ask enough questions. The agent wrote that down. Lorraine shifted. I handled the finances, she said suddenly. All eyes turned. I signed off on the reports. Silence thickened. Eleanor felt something loosen inside her. Not satisfaction. Release. The agent nodded once. Thank you for your honesty. Lorraine closed her eyes. Hours passed. The light shifted. The estate felt smaller by the minute, its grandeur reduced to walls and ledgers. Outside, the reporter finally raised her camera. A single question floated through the open window. Ms. Brooks, do you believe justice was denied here? Eleanor stepped toward the door, pausing just long enough to feel the weight of every eye behind her. Justice, she said. Voice carrying is rarely denied outright. It's delayed, and delay has a cost. The reporter nodded, scribbling. Daniel exhaled slowly. That's going to run everywhere. Eleanor looked at him. Truth travels. As evening approached, the officials packed up their work, just beginning elsewhere. Aaron lingered. There's one more thing, he said quietly. The trust board voted this morning. Eleanor turned. And they want you to assume interim oversight. Lorraine stiffened. Daniel looked stunned. Eleanor felt the familiar resistance rise. I didn't come for a position. They're not offering power, Aaron said. They're asking for stewardship. Eleanor considered the estate, the land beyond it, the stories pressed into the soil. Temporary, she said, until the process is complete. Aaron nodded. Of course. Daniel stepped closer. If you do this, he said. What happens to us? Eleanor met his gaze. That depends on whether you're willing to build something different. He nodded, slow and certain. I am. Lorraine watched them, something unreadable in her expression. And me? She asked. Eleanor looked at her. Really looked. You face what comes, she said. And you stop pretending you're the only one who's suffered. Lorraine flinched, then nodded once. The sun dipped low, painting the walls gold. Eleanor felt the day settle into her bones, heavy but honest. As she stepped outside, the air smelled clean. Not forgiven. Not finished. Just real. Behind her, the estate stood, stripped of illusion, waiting to be something else. And for the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to believe that waiting might lead somewhere worth arriving. The first knock came just after dusk, measured and patient, the sound of someone who knew waiting would not change the outcome. Eleanor was standing at the window when it happened, looking out over the lower fields where mist had begun to gather, softening the edges of everything the day had stripped bare. She didn't turn right away. She let the knock exist, let it echo through the quiet house the trust had placed her in for the interim. Temporary walls, temporary authority. Nothing about this felt temporary. The knock came again. She opened the door. Daniel stood on the porch alone. Jacket folded over his arm hair, still damp from a shower that hadn't quite washed the day off him. His eyes looked clearer than they had at the wedding. Not lighter. Clearer. I wasn't sure you'd see me, he said. I said honesty mattered, Eleanor replied. That includes doors. He nodded and stepped inside, pausing just long enough to take in the modest space. No portraits, no history curated into frames. Just furniture chosen to be useful. A place meant to be lived in, not admired. She's packing, Daniel said quietly. Eleanor didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Is she cooperating? He exhaled, as much as she knows how. The lawyers are circling. Old friends stopped returning calls. Power thins quickly when it's no longer exclusive, Eleanor said. Daniel winced, not in disagreement, but recognition. I keep thinking about what you said, about building something different. And, Eleanor asked, and I don't know how to do that without tearing down what I came from. Eleanor gestured to the chair across from her. He sat, shoulders slumping, the moment he did the tension he'd been holding finally visible. You don't dismantle a lie by pretending it was never useful, she said. You dismantle it by understanding why you needed it. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I needed to believe we deserved everything we had. That's human, Eleanor said. What you do with that belief is what matters. He looked up. They're saying charges could follow. Civil at first. Maybe criminal. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. And I'm ready, he said. The words surprised him as much as they did her. Not for punishment, for consequence. She nodded once. That's a beginning. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, the kind that allowed thought to breathe. Daniel shifted. There's something else. Eleanor waited. The board, he said. They want someone from the family involved. Symbolic. Transitional. And they asked you, Eleanor said. Yes. He swallowed. I told them I wouldn't accept unless you agreed. Eleanor studied him, weighing intention against outcome. You understand what that would mean. I do, he said. It means I don't get to hide behind the past anymore. She leaned back, considering. It also means you'll be watched. He nodded. Good. The door creaked softly then. Claire stepped inside, tentative eyes, scanning Eleanor's face for permission. She wasn't sure she deserved to ask for. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to intrude. You didn't, Eleanor replied. You came honestly. Claire relaxed slightly, relief flickering. We didn't know where else to go. Eleanor gestured to the other chair. Claire sat hands folded in her lap, posture straight but careful. I keep replaying it, Claire said. The way everyone avoided you, the way I did too. Eleanor met her gaze. Avoidance is a learned reflex. Awareness is the unlearning. Claire nodded, eyes bright. I don't want to be part of that anymore. Then don't, Eleanor said simply. Daniel looked between them. If we stay, he said, if we help transition the estate, people will think it's optics. Damage control. They will, Eleanor said. Some of them will be right. Daniel winced again. Then why do it? Because optics don't negate outcomes, Eleanor replied, and because refusing responsibility doesn't absolve you of it. Claire swallowed. We'll do whatever it takes. Eleanor studied her now. Not the dress, not the wedding that hadn't happened, the steadiness in her eyes. Whatever it takes is vague, she said. Tell me what you mean. Claire took a breath. I mean, we give up control. We listen. We don't ask to be protected. Eleanor felt something settle. That she said is specific. A distant sound drifted through the open window. A car door. Voices. Flashing light reflected briefly against the wall. The world outside was still moving, still watching. They're here, Daniel said softly. I know, Eleanor replied. He stood, then hesitated. If I take this role, he said, and I fail. Then you will be accountable, Eleanor said. Like everyone else. He nodded, accepting it. Claire stood as well. Thank you, she said to Eleanor, for not making this easy. Eleanor smiled faintly. Easy teaches nothing. They left together, the door closing quietly behind them. Eleanor stood alone again, listening to the house settle. Somewhere nearby, the estate loomed heavy with stories that would not be rewritten overnight. Her phone vibrated on the table. A message from Aaron. Board confirmation. Interim oversight approved. Public announcement pending. She turned off the screen without replying. Outside, the mist thickened, rolling over land that had learned how to wait. Eleanor returned to the window. She thought of the guests who had looked through her, of the silence that had protected cruelty, of the name spoken aloud that had broken it open. Change did not arrive as spectacle. It arrived as obligation, and this was only the beginning. The announcement went live at 9 in the morning, quiet and unadorned the way truths that intend to last usually are. By 10, it was everywhere. Eleanor watched the headline scroll across her phone without touching it. Interim oversight, historical land trust. Audit underway. Words stripped of drama, heavy with implication. She turned the screen face down and focused on the room in front of her, the long table where maps were spread like a body waiting to be understood. Markers circled wetlands and access roads. Sticky notes marked easements and forgotten footpaths. The estate was no longer a backdrop. It was a system. Aaron arrived with 2 board members just after 10:30. They were older, cautious, their authority born of time rather than volume. They shook Eleanor's hand and sat without ceremony. "We need to move carefully," one of them said, a woman with silver hair and an engineer's precision. "The neighbors are already organizing." "They should," Eleanor replied. "They've been excluded." The other board member nodded. "We'll face resistance." "Good," Eleanor said. Resistance tells you where the pressure points are. Outside, a cluster of reporters had gathered near the gate, not shouting, waiting, the kind of patience that came with experience. Eleanor did not look at them. Daniel arrived late, breathless, jacket half-buttoned. He carried a folder thicker than his own comfort. "I brought the financials," he said. "Everything we have." Eleanor took the folder, flipping through without comment. She saw the hesitations in the margins, the corrections, the questions he had written to himself. The beginning of honesty always looked like that. Claire followed quieter. Carrying coffee, no one touched. She watched Eleanor work, eyes tracking the movement of her hands across paper, as if trying to memorize the rhythm. A knock sounded. The estate manager entered, followed by a man Eleanor had not seen since the wedding. "Henry," the older guest who had stood. "I heard you were asking for people who remembered." Henry said, voice steady. "I remember." Eleanor gestured to a chair. "Sit." He did, placing his hat carefully on the table. "My father worked these grounds before the fences," he said. "Before the rules changed." Eleanor listened. She did not interrupt. Memory needed space. "They told us it was temporary." Henry continued. "That access would return. It never did." Eleanor nodded. "It will." Outside, a shout rose. Not angry, curious. A woman's voice carried over the hedges. "Is it true they're opening the trail again?" Eleanor stood and walked to the window. She opened it just enough to let her voice travel. "Yes," she said. "But not today." The crowd murmured, disappointed but relieved. "We'll need a timeline," Aaron said. "You'll have one," Eleanor replied. "Built with the people who were excluded from it." Daniel shifted. "That means hearings." "It does," Eleanor said. "And listening." He nodded, a little pale. "I'm ready." By noon, the calls had begun. Donors, neighbors, former friends of the Callaways' voices, edged with grievance or fear. Eleanor took some, declined others. She spoke plainly. She refused to soften consequences. Lorraine called once. Eleanor let it go to voicemail. In the afternoon, a small group arrived unannounced, residents from the nearby town. Not protesters, not supporters, witnesses. They stood near the gate, holding nothing but questions. Eleanor went to them. Groom. A woman with sun-weathered skin spoke first. "We just want to know if this is real." "It is," Eleanor said. A man beside her frowned. "And if it changes again?" "Then you hold the people in charge accountable," Eleanor replied, "including me." That mattered. She saw it in their faces. By evening, the estate felt transformed. Not peaceful, honest. The illusion of permanence had cracked, revealing the work beneath it. Eleanor returned to the house, exhaustion settling into her bones. She sat at the small desk and finally listened to Lorraine's voicemail. It was short. "I don't know who I am without this," Lorraine said. Her voice broke. "If there's any part of you that understands, please." Eleanor closed her eyes. She understood more than Lorraine knew. She did not call back. Not yet. Daniel knocked softly. "There's something you should see." He led her to the west wing, a space long kept closed. Dust hung in the air as the door opened. Inside, a wall of framed photographs, galas, politicians, smiling faces, a curated history, and behind it, Daniel said, pulling a panel aside, a second wall, older, names etched into wood, dates, the kind of record no one had meant to preserve. Eleanor stepped closer, her fingers traced a familiar surname. Her breath caught just for a moment. "They hid it," Daniel said quietly. "They tried," Eleanor replied. Outside, the sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the lawn. The reporters had gone. The neighbors lingered. The estate listened. Eleanor felt the weight of oversight press in heavier now that it was real. This was not a victory lap. This was maintenance. Claire joined them, eyes wide at the hidden wall. "What happens to it?" "It stays," Eleanor said. "It gets named." Claire nodded, swallowing. "I want to help." "You will," Eleanor replied. "By telling the truth when it's uncomfortable." Night settled in cool and deliberate. Eleanor stepped outside alone, breathing in the damp air. She thought of the guests who had avoided her, of the name spoken aloud, of the systems that bent when confronted with patience. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Aaron. "Press wants a statement." One line. Eleanor typed slowly. "Accountability is not punishment. It is care applied with memory." She sent it and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Behind her, the estate stood changed, not redeemed, not condemned, just awake. And Eleanor, steady in the dark, prepared for the next day, knowing that the hardest work rarely announced itself. It waited, demanding to be done well. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday, early enough to discourage spectacle, late enough to ensure everyone who mattered could attend. Eleanor arrived before the room filled, placing her folder on the long oak table and taking the seat no one had assigned her. The county seal hung behind the dais, faded from years of use. The chairs creaked when people sat, a sound she welcomed. It meant the place was real. By the time the clock struck 10, the room was full. Not crowded. Intent. Neighbors from the town, representatives from the trust, reporters lining the back wall with notebooks instead of cameras. Daniel and Claire sat together near the aisle, hands folded, posture straight. Lorraine took a seat alone, 2 rows behind them, coat buttoned too tightly, eyes fixed on the floor. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "This hearing will come to order." Eleanor listened as the formalities rolled by, the language precise and unglamorous. Jurisdiction, scope, process, the bones of accountability. When it was her turn to speak, she stood without ceremony. The room quieted not out of reverence, but readiness. "I am not here to assign blame," Eleanor said. "I am here to restore a process that was interrupted." A murmur ran through the room. The chairwoman nodded. "Proceed." Eleanor outlined the findings without flourish. The land trust's intent, the deviations, the quiet expansions, the doors closed one by one. She spoke plainly, naming actions without adjectives, letting the facts carry their own weight. When questions came, she answered them. When she did not know, she said so. The rhythm settled. Trust built not on authority, but consistency. Daniel was called next. He stood, shoulders squared, voice steady. "I benefited from a system I didn't question," he said. "I'm here to change that." A council member leaned forward. "What does change look like to you?" Daniel swallowed. "Shared governance, transparent budgets, public access restored." "And your role," the council member pressed. Daniel did not hesitate. "Accountable participant," he said. "Not decision-maker." Lorraine flinched. Claire spoke briefly, her words careful. "We don't want to inherit something we didn't earn," she said. "We want to help repair what was broken." The chairwoman nodded once. Then Lorraine was called. She stood slowly, gripping the back of her chair, as if it might steady her. When she spoke, her voice trembled, then found its footing. "I believed stewardship meant control," she said. "I was wrong." A reporter's pen scratched louder than necessary. Lorraine continued, eyes lifting for the first time. "I am prepared to cooperate. Fully." The room held its breath. The chairwoman leaned back. "That cooperation will matter." It did. By midday, the outline of consequences was clear. Financial restitution, public access timelines, oversight committees, a review of tax abatements that would not end kindly. No one cheered. No one protested. This was not a verdict. It was a beginning. Outside, the air felt lighter, as if the building itself had exhaled. Eleanor stood on the steps, answering a single question from a local reporter. "What happens now?" "Now," Eleanor said, "we do the work." That evening, the estate opened its gates for the first time in decades. Not for a gala, for a walk. Neighbors moved cautiously at first, stepping onto paths they had only seen from a distance. Children ran ahead, laughter echoing against stone. Dogs tugged at leashes. The land responded not dramatically, but honestly. Eleanor watched from the edge, hands in her coat pockets. Henry stood beside her, hat in hand. "My father would have liked this," he said. Eleanor nodded. "So would mine." Daniel approached, breathless eyes bright. They're talking about a community council, he said. People volunteering. Good, Eleanor replied. And the house? He asked. Eleanor looked toward the main building lights, glowing warm but subdued. It becomes what it was meant to be, she said. A place that holds more than one story. Lorraine watched from a distance, separated by more than space. Eleanor met her gaze briefly, then looked away. Not yet. Night settled gentle and cool. The estate felt different under open sky, its edges softened by footsteps that did not ask permission. Later, Eleanor returned to the small room the trust had given her. She sat at the desk and opened a letter she had carried for years, folded thin from handling. Her father's handwriting slanted across the page, hopeful and precise. She read it once more, then placed it back in the folder. Her phone buzzed. A message from Aaron. Board approved the transition plan. You did it? Eleanor typed back. We did. She turned off the light and lay down, exhaustion heavy but clean. Outside, the sounds of the town drifted in. Life uncurated. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more resistance, more care required. But tonight the land was open, and that mattered. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle, knowing that restoration was not a moment, but a practice she was ready to keep. The estate woke differently on the final morning Eleanor spent there. No cars lined the drive. No reporters waited by the gate. The grass still held the shape of hundreds of footsteps, faint impressions that would fade with time. But for now, they remained proof that something irreversible had happened. Eleanor stood on the back terrace, coffee cooling in her hands, watching light move across the land. She had learned long ago that endings rarely announced themselves. They arrived quietly disguised as routine. Daniel joined her, but without speaking. He looked rested for the first time in days. Not relieved, grounded. They approved the first transfer, he said. Public access easements, funding oversight. Everything we discussed. Eleanor nodded. Good. They asked if you'd stay longer, he added. Officially. She didn't answer right away. She listened instead to the birds reclaiming space, once ceded to orchestras, and applause to the low hum of a place relearning itself. I was never meant to stay, she said finally. I was meant to start something. Daniel accepted that the way he had learned to accept many things lately. I'm glad you did. Inside the house, Lorraine moved slowly, deliberately. Boxes stacked neatly by the door. Not fleeing. Leaving. She paused when she saw Eleanor through the window, then stepped outside. I wanted to say goodbye, Lorraine said. Her voice held no edge now, only fatigue. Eleanor faced her fully. I hope you say more than goodbye. Lorraine nodded. I will. To them. To myself. She hesitated. I don't expect forgiveness. No, Eleanor said. You shouldn't. Lorraine absorbed that, strangely relieved. I used to think forgiveness was something you demanded. It's something you earn, Eleanor replied. And something others choose. Lorraine's eyes glistened. Daniel will be better than I was. He already is, Eleanor said. Lorraine exhaled a long breath that seemed to empty years from her chest. She turned and walked toward the waiting car without looking back. By midday, Eleanor's bags were packed. Not many. She had never carried much with her. Aaron arrived briefly, handing over documents, confirmation's next steps. They spoke in shorthand, two people who understood that systems moved slowly and vigilance mattered. When he left, the house felt hollow, but not lonely. Eleanor walked the grounds one last time. The oak tree. The path reopened to the town. The wall with names uncovered and named at last. Children's voices drifted from the far end, laughter unrestrained, belonging unquestioned. She stopped where the wedding aisle had been. The chairs were gone. Only flattened grass remained, the ghost of an arrangement built on certainty that had not survived contact with truth. Claire appeared, shoes in hand, hair loose, face clear. "We're leaving too," she said. "Not running. Choosing." Eleanor smiled. "That matters." Claire hesitated. "Will we see you again?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "But not like this." Daniel joined them, holding the car door open. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You already did," Eleanor replied. "By listening when it was uncomfortable." He nodded. "We won't waste it." She believed him. The drive away was quiet, fields giving way to road to distance. The estate receded in the mirror until it was only land again, no longer a symbol waiting to be confronted. Eleanor rested her head back, letting the motion carry her forward. She thought of the wedding guests who had avoided her, not out of malice alone, but habit. Of how easily silence had done the work of exclusion. Of how one name spoken aloud at the right moment had shifted an entire structure. She had not raised her voice. She had not demanded attention. She had stood still long enough for others to feel the weight of their own assumptions. That was the part people never expected. At a red light, she glanced at her phone. Messages waited. From the board, from the town council, from people who had found themselves reflected in a story they could no longer ignore. She did not answer them yet. Some truths needed space to settle. As the car moved again, Eleanor watched the landscape change, knowing the work would continue elsewhere, in other forms under different names. Accountability did not belong to one place. It followed wherever power went unexamined. She closed her eyes, not in rest, but resolve. If this story moved you, if it made you pause and reconsider how easily people are seen or unseen, take a moment to like the story, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts by commenting. These 3 words. Speak names aloud.